Good evening, sir. Vanakkam.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for accepting to be with us for the next 60 minutes. This expert talks with Hari by Srishti TV is segmented into three parts. First segment is all about you, your childhood, your college days, all the way till today, and the lessons learned during the journey. Second segment will focus on adapting to the new normal, and the third one is a surprise segment, which I'll explain when we get there. Now we'll start with you. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, so a little bit of a background. I guess the story is I like breaking this into 6 chapters. So, India 1.0, I lived here for the first 12 years of my life. And I think I was brought up in a very conservative household. I studied in Don Bosco School in Chetpet, South Madras, in India, and very strong in terms of, like most Catholic schools, value based learning, as well as at home, it was very family value centric. So I was brought up in a family of, I would say, entrepreneurs, but very strong female leaders. My grandmother was a very strong influence in my life. My aunt, my father, my mother, my uncle and aunt. So joint family household, very strong value centric system, and high discipline. And for the first 12 years of my life, I was an average student in Don Bosco, had some great friends. I still have many great friends from my time there. And probably the key highlights is, other than learning this really weird sport called croquet, which is a cross between cricket and baseball. I think the only other highlight was I probably was not very good at cricket. I was probably an average student in class, but I think I really enjoyed making friends in the school environment, and I really enjoyed playing football. The next 12 years of my life were in England, and I was moved there basically because of family reality, I guess, to have a better life to a large extent, and also because my mother had quite a bit of family there. England was a very different experience. I moved school 3, 4 times before I could settle. Uh, and it was a tough time because when I first went there, I didn't know a single swear word or a single word that was complex. And basically, as I said, conservative, sheltered upbringing. And in England, everything is relatively in your face, competitive. There were components like racism, bullying that I had to go through in school. I was bullied quite a lot, which I'd never experienced in India. In Don Bosco culture, that didn't exist, at least my experience of it. And that was some tough learning. So I did that, and I guess I learned a lot about adulthood very early in life. We had some family problems with mother's side, so we moved very quickly from a relatively spacious environment to a very small environment. We're talking about 200 square feet apartment, which a lot of people, I think, have never had the luxury of experiencing. And so I learned the concept of hunger, not hunger from food on the table, but hunger in terms of what you want to chase in life. And that pushed me a little bit into entrepreneurship. I actually started my first company at the age of 12, buying and selling computers. And this was while I was at school. This also pushed me quite hard into basically understanding commercial trading. And I saw family businesses on the side, but this is what I wanted to do. So I bought and sold computers, and this was in the very early days of computer emergence. We're talking about the 80s. So great time, made money, but my grades suffered. And so one of the things I always will remember is my parents sitting me down and saying, you have to choose. And our recommendation to you, so they gave me a choice, but they said recommendation is pick studies because you can always come back to business. And I followed their advice. And so this taught me two things. One is get good people around you and take advice that is given well. And as an independent young child who wanted to make money, it was probably very easy for me to uh, go chasing money and the success of entrepreneurship, especially when you're that young, right? Because money buys freedom at a young age. But
Yes.
sometimes education buys long term success. And so I learned a lot about entrepreneurship, but I also learned about the structure of education. And so I muddled my way. I graduated through high school, and I then went to university. And I chose chemical engineering. It was probably not an easy choice because I first chose pharmacy. Then I spoke to a few people, and they said engineering is better. You'll enjoy it more. And I visited my first chemical plant around that time. So that's a great experience for me that, before you choose your career, it's one of the biggest life decisions you will make. Go visit a couple of people who are living the consequence of their choice and have a look around. And I learned a lot. I mean, I loved the factory atmosphere. I loved the fact that a chemical engineer could manage people in a very operational centric environment, processing plant. So I saw a pickle factory, I saw a pharmaceutical company, and I learned a lot. And so while I was studying, I also worked for a couple of years part time and did some internships. So I worked for some big companies in the Fortune 10 space in chemicals, ICI, Exxon, British Petroleum. And so I think one of the things I would always recommend to anybody is early experience in good companies that give you something more than you had before matters. So, with some family business experience that I had had when I was young, I also got this entrepreneurship experience in England, and I got this corporate experience. And I did my bachelor's and master's. I worked for a couple of years in these companies. I then went and joined Shell in the Netherlands. So the next chapter of my life in the Netherlands took off, and this is Holland. So very different life. I got the one of my life dreams, which was working on drilling rigs in the North Sea. So I always wanted to work in the North Sea offshore to see all these big production platforms. What do they do? So they actually made me manage one, and it was a very different experience. I got to manage about 80 people on my first day, and I learned very quickly nobody's going to listen because you shout loud. Nobody's going to listen because you have a high education. People are going to listen because you can earn their respect.
True.
So, one of my toughest experiences was working late at night, working in the field, carrying boxes when we were offloading a drill ship. And I did this with the crew, and nobody asked me to do it. But the next day, the way people looked at me on the drilling rig was very different to the day before. They treated me as one of their own. And that's a big deal in leadership, right? That if you can learn how to communicate well, and the Dutch are very straightforward, meaning they're in your face. They will tell you exactly what they mean. And it had a profound impact on my life because I liked this reality of people telling you exactly what they're thinking. See, India is a very story culture. We go around what we want a person to understand about ourselves. The British are very diplomatic, but the Dutch are very straightforward. They're blunt and sometimes a little bit rude to your face. But actually, I loved it because if you tell people what you mean, there is no communication band loss. You're not
Right.
losing anything in translation or less. I also learned a lot about variety because while I was working, I also got involved in the United Nations in Holland. And that took me to Russia to be an election observer for the Soviet elections when Putin came to power. Very different experience. I learned to dance salsa in the Netherlands. I got married. I met my wife in Oman while I was visiting there, and we kind of like fell in love. And that's another story that you might have to book another interview for and interview her. Much more interesting than me. But I had a story that's like You've Got Mail, a very fairy tale, modern internet story. And without the internet, I would not have gotten married, I'll tell you honestly. I was a relatively shy guy, even though I had these habits like salsa dancing. I wasn't quite that hardwired to go and chase. But I really learned how to enjoy variety and how to basically treat people and communicate. That was my Netherlands experience. I then moved to Argentina and Brazil, and this time with Rochna, my wife, or as I call her, my better three quarters. And Argentina was very interesting. This was a new continent. I had never experienced Latin culture. The primary language was different. Here, I had to learn Spanish. So in Holland, I learned Dutch, but I didn't have to communicate in Dutch. I could get away with English. In Argentina, and also I spent a fair bit of time between Argentina and Brazil, it was a very different culture. This was a very laid back Latin social culture, I would say. So every 3 hours, half the team that I was managing would go out for coffee, and they would go out for 1 hour coffee, not 10 minutes coffee. So if you think the coffee break in England or India is bad, trust me, the Argentinians and the Brazilians are worse. Uh, but it was a very nice culture. I learned a lot. What happened there, though, is 3 months into my time in Argentina, they had their political crisis and they had a massive devaluation where they basically froze their currency, and their currency effectively divided by three and a half. So, what I could buy, let's say, with 100 pesos, a lot with, all of a sudden, I could buy only a third of what I could buy before. And the
Okay.
other thing is they had 5 presidents in 2 weeks. So I still have this memory of running out of my office with tear gas in my eyes because Argentina went through a very tough political crisis. And what that experience taught Rochna and me was that you have to learn change. And sometimes you have to look into the eye of a storm and sit there, because you learn best sometimes by massive change. And so I made a commitment really in Argentina that I wasn't going to run away like a lot of the expatriates at the time who I worked for a great company, Shell. They gave us the option of moving anywhere in the world. And I said, no, I moved here to build a big project, a $2 billion project. I would like to build that project or at least do something in Argentina. And so I spent 2 years basically trying hard. I am one of the few people, I'll say, that has been a failure in trying to make acquisitions, because I put $1 billion bid for a company as the project leader and failed. Somebody
Wow.
beat us with that. And if you're going to fail, trust me, guys, you don't want to fail with $1 billion bid, because the people around you look at you very differently. But it was a very good experience because I learned also how to manage people. Because one of the things I did while I was in Argentina and Brazil was try and convince Shell that perhaps the business footprint we had there was not that strong. So they asked me to help sell some of the assets. And looking after the team through that experience was a very tough time. I then moved to the United States, actually to go and pursue one of my life dreams. So after selling one of the assets, I moved to the US to basically go and do my MBA. I studied in Northwestern and Kellogg, and I did 2 degrees for the price of one: a master's, an MBA degree in business administration, and a master's in lean manufacturing.
Okay.
And it's only because I'm Gujarati, so they offer two for the price of one. That's the only reason, right? Otherwise, I was home set on the MBA. And US was great. I did my MBA. I learned a lot. I loved studying. I also then worked for a really brilliant company called McKinsey and Company. It's quite famous in the consulting space, and I learned a lot. And so I think my US time of 4 years was a lot about learning in terms of thinking structure and networks. So, how do you make friends with very different types of people? The Americans are phenomenal at making light contacts and networks with people. And I think that's a great skill in business. And
Yes.
so that was something I embraced and learned. I still like genuine, deep friends, which I learned from my time in India, my time in the Netherlands, and obviously Argentina, and even my school friends. But I think in America, this concept of networks, it was much harder to make deep friends there. That takes a lot longer in America. And that brought me back to India and India 2.0. So we moved back in 2007. And Rochna and me moved back for a combination of professional and personal reasons. We took basically a year out mid career. And part of that was I wasn't sure I wanted to continue consulting, and part of that was we didn't know where in the world we'd like to live. And part of that was we wanted to spend a bit more time with the family. And I moved back to India. I started working in the family business, Dr. Mehta Hospitals. And I also started some businesses on the side. I started investing some of the family money. I got involved in the Chennai Angels. I run a family office, the Atlas Family Office, which is an investment vehicle. And this combination of three, four things really was brilliant because it meant that I got deep by actually doing real things on the ground, and that's Dr. Mehta's. So I learned all about grit and hard work. And then I got to do all my dreams. I got to invest in companies and I got to create my own companies, and that's like following your dreams. The best world that I can ever say is being an entrepreneur because you can follow your dreams. And I got to invest and spend time on the boards of companies. And to be able to balance all this, I learned that you sometimes have to do temporal balancing. How do you juggle balls in the air? Uh, and that's what my India experience is. I'm very fortunate. I'm blessed with two daughters, Anya and Ria. They're twins. I'm blessed with a very strong joint family in my Mehta family. And we have this family of values that we learned very early from India 1.0. So every time I join a new group, whether it's say the Chennai Angels or the vice president of the Healthcare Association of India, or things like that, the different bodies I share time with and boards, they are a new family that I make part of our family. And if you treat the world as a family, the world gets better. And because I have this, we've been blessed with having healthy family members, especially at times like this through COVID. You really respect having such a big family around you. And a great institution. I mean, my experience with Dr. Mehta's, it's obviously not in the same scale as something like Shell or Exxon or BP or the United Nations or McKinsey, but it is probably a very much more value-based oriented institution, and it saves more lives every day. So I think I've had the privilege of being where I am, especially at a time like COVID.
Thank you, sir. That's you have compressed 1.0 and 2.0 in 18 minutes. A lot of learnings from that, actually. What were the certain key challenges you faced in this complete journey from UK to US, Argentina, and all these areas, Holland? Key challenges and the lessons learned.
Yeah, so I will share maybe three or four. So
Sure.
moving to the UK taught me something interesting. It taught me we learned how to survive. And I think that's a very important thing. If you learn how to survive when you're hungry, I'll tell you a very simple thing. Every year, you restart and reset your clock and ego to zero. It helps you. If you move to a new place and you start an ego clock every year saying, I've already built 20 ego credits, I'm now CEO, treat me like a CEO, actually, you're a less interesting person for tomorrow. So, my first big learning moving to the UK and moving to all these countries is it's always important every year or every job you start, restart to zero, and re-earn the right. Basically, if you have no ego, people will like you for you. And I think if you've learned the right things from the past, they will like the best of you. So I think that is one that's very important. The second is my experience when I was trying to build my first company at the age of 12 and 14 and managing my grades, and also my India 2.0 experience, that it is important in life at times to build capacity in yourself. Meaning, can you manage multiple task management and compartmentalization, or what we call this concept of balancing, temporal balancing? If you can do that really well, you will be very successful in life, right? There are people who, when you walk into the room, they are already at 1,000 miles an hour thinking for that thing in the room. And when you go to the next meeting, which is very different, this person is already at 1,000 miles an hour there. There are some exceptional people, and I have some great mentors, Roland, Ramraj, my father, dad, who actually exhibit this at a scale that I had not understood when I spent most of my time with them. Marco, one of my bosses in Argentina, and Marius, they were great people for being able to have this capacity building concept. You build mental capacity so you can do many things at the same time. And that's like building a muscle, right? If you build your muscles, the next job is easy. So that was another big thing for me. The third one is all about our experience in some of our family businesses. We had to settle, we had to sell. We used to run a very big global food business that we lost, and we had to do a family settlement around in the pickle business globally called Pataks. And I think this is around making sure your value system and your inner compass is clear. So I've sat there in the room, in negotiation rooms, where I think people are fighting for how much you can split off a cup of coffee, right? Or how much there is in anything. And I think, the best thing in life is never to split what is there, but to grow the size of the cup. If you grow the cup, there is more for everybody, and that's all about creation. And I think the best thing in life that will help you is if you have a great set of values and an inner compass, you can actually enjoy what's in the cup sometimes together. And that is very important. So I will toast all of you on this call to good health. And maybe my last thing that I will share in life is around my decision to move back to India for India 2.0. And this is the reality that if you build anchors in your life, what I mean by anchors, think about yourself as a ship. If you have a number of anchors that keep you stable, whether it's family anchors, whether it's a great circle of friends, whether it's a very stable profession, whether it's a stable country choice or something, you need a few anchors in life to keep you very stable. And I mean, the first couple of chapters of my life were all about moving continents, changing professional responsibility, right? I worked as a chemical engineer. I worked in project management, in commercial negotiations, as a management consultant. I then created an investment bank. I created an art company, a game company, a home healthcare company. These are all different. But the more anchors you have, the more stability you have. And I think anchors like the partner you choose in your life, the family members around you, the quality of friends from very early childhood to as you grow older, making sure you have deep anchors tying you to a little bit of the stability of your life will matter in your life and growth. These are my top four lessons I think that are out there.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you.
my fifth lesson is actually at a time of COVID. So
Hmm.
every day I get calls from many, many friends and many, many people who know me through distant acquaintances saying, can you help me get a bed in a hospital somewhere in the country? Can you help me? I live in the United States. We're struggling. I have this problem. Can you give me some advice what we should do? Or, hey, we're stuck in Salem. My father is ill in Bangalore. Which hospital should we go to? Or the other end of the extreme, I have some friend who's in Mehta hospital. Can you give them a discount? And it's a very interesting time in our lives. I think this is the time where your friends who are doctors, nurses, and allied health, you really have to put hats off, because most people on an average day like today look outside and we're a bit scared to go out. We are really scared of getting COVID. Most of them put themselves in harm's way. And I think this experience of when people ask for help, because it is fundamentally what matters, is keeping my family, my loved ones safe, keeping ourselves safe, because we're scared of our lives. And sometimes people say, look, I may not have that much money, so I'm a little bit worried about the hospital bill. Here is my best piece of advice. You should, why are you saving so much money? You're saving money so that it matters on the rainiest day or the toughest decisions. Your toughest decisions typically or your best decisions are getting married. So people spend a lot getting married, right? Your second one is probably getting a job or your education, right? To get a job, it's about education. Education is a very expensive thing in most parts of the world. So that's another big thing that we spend a lot of money on. Guys, the third one is probably the health of your loved ones or yourself. This is a day that you have to spend some money, or if you're really lucky and have insurance, or if you're covered by some government scheme, there are some great government hospitals, there are some great trust hospitals, there are great charitable hospitals out there, mission hospitals, and there are great community hospitals like Dr. Mehta's, right? Make friends with those people, because tomorrow you might need them. And tomorrow, if you have speed dial of whether it's a Samir Mehta, or whether it's the CEO of Manipal who I had to call for a friend, or whether it's the CEO of Medanta who I also had to call for a friend, or it's the CEO of Nanavati or Baptist hospitals like one of my guides, Dr. Alexander Thomas or Dr. Vijay Agarwal, these are the days you need that network, right? So you build a bridge before you cross for what truly matters. So all the money in the world is for today to keep your family and your loved ones, close friends safe. It is not for day after tomorrow, right? Because we will rebuild, we will come out of this and rebuild our lives. Those are the lessons.
Thank you so much. Important lessons in life, and that too at this time of crisis. Now we move on to the next segment, which is adapting to the new normal. What is new normal to you?
So I think there is, normal is a strange word, because it means there is a degree of stability that is clear. We can see line at the end of the tunnel. I think what I can tell you is, I can't tell you when COVID is going to end. I
Mhm.
can't tell you which vaccine will succeed. I can't tell you which government policies will work, because at different times we have different amount and quality of information. For example, we all got carried away with this concept of hammer and dance about 4 months ago. It was a fantastically well researched article that came out from a non clinician in terms of how to treat pandemic. And that did not help us get out of a lockdown. It did not help any country actually get out of their problem. It only gave us warning on how to get into the wheel of war, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So the new normal for me is going to be a lot of change. It's going to have some very new components. Technology will be something we embrace a lot more. I think for those people who are not familiar with the concept of telemedicine, today a lot of Dr. Mehta's touch points, at least first touch points, right? People in different parts of the world, people in different parts of India, people who don't want to take a risk stepping out, call us and take our service of home consulting, right? And this is a big deal, because a doctor would have to come. Now a doctor can plan their consulting in their place of comfort. So technology, if you're at the supplier or the provider, if you're disrupted like a clinician, or if you're the person who benefits disproportionately like a person who lives in rural India, fantastic time. Because today I can take the best of service at a relatively low cost or no cost, right, because of technology in another part of the world. So for the first time in our life, people in America, which is amongst the most expensive health systems, are using healthcare in India, which is amongst the most value based quality health available in the world, which means the world is finding its balance, right? We're doing efficiency around the world finally. So that is one part of new normal technology. The other part, this is a time where I think it is all about human contact. I and every person around me needs human contact, because if you don't have human contact, you don't get hope, you don't feel love, you don't feel many of the best emotions of humanity. And I think it's days like today that really make you wish and thank yourself that you have great circles around you. And if you don't, go find them today, right? Because there are some great people around you, young, old, any part of the world, doesn't matter what caste, geography, it doesn't matter if they're male or female, it doesn't matter if they are better educated, less educated, it doesn't matter what social class, it doesn't matter, right? At a time where some countries believe borders are important, to me, the new normal is about borders being less important. Today, COVID that started in Wuhan, a city or a town I've never heard of, right? I had never heard of it, has impacted my life sitting in Madras, Chennai. It has impacted my brother's life. It has impacted somebody's life sitting in some remote part of England, some remote part of Africa, some remote part of Latin America, my nephew living in New Zealand, right? It has impacted all these different people. So the world actually has no borders. So if you have human touch and human value, you go much further. And I think that is a big component of, I think, what the new normal is, that if you embrace more of humanity, we will be better. Because, today we have a pandemic. Today, many of us are worrying about our jobs. Many of us are worrying about our businesses. Many of us are worrying about our lives. And many of us are worrying about our loved ones. I think some of us are also worrying about our savings and how to be more successful. But some people who are studying are worrying, when can I go back to work or class? When can I find a job? So you're always worried about something. It's also a bit of, when you're with good people around you, you worry less, you enjoy more. And I think worrying about my job, the good news when change is there is you will find a new job. And you can always train yourself to find a new job. I am today studying for my part time doctorate at IIT Madras, and I'm doing it in human behavior, gamification, and artificial intelligence. So I have some great guides. Every week, I read about something in the latest of artificial intelligence and machine learning, something I've never done in my life before. Right? I studied engineering, I studied business, I studied lean manufacturing, I studied petroleum engineering, I studied healthcare when I joined Dr. Mehta's. I have never in my life looked at artificial intelligence and machine learning. Today, I am learning lots. I'm learning different algorithms, nearest neighbor, complicated trees, right? Decision making trees, neural networks. And I think that is the best when you can push yourself to learn new things at a time where human value is challenged. The world looks very different to when you're worrying about something. So today, if you're worrying about something, stop worrying. You can't do anything about your worry. What you can do about is learn something new. That means the world looks green, not gray. And I think if the world looks green, it means that it's blossoming, you're having fruits that are harvesting. This is the best year in a long time for monsoon and rural harvesting in India, right? So I talk to my friends, tractor sales are at an all time high in India. Agricultural yield is higher than many previous years. Rural money in pocket of an average person in India, 70% of people in India actually have more money in their pocket than they've ever had before, right?
Okay.
So I think look at the green in life, don't look at the gray in life. And I think the third point in the new normal is all about, the people that matter, go and thank them, go and hug them, and go and spend time with them. Whether it's your parents, I have spent very little time with my parents in this crisis physically because we live in different parts of the city. And I don't want to put them at risk, and neither do I want to put the people I live with, my mother in law, at risk either. So I'm in a catch 22. I have an aunt and an uncle that I love deeply, and they're also at very sensitive ages. And I have great people that I really love sharing time with out there, lots of friends who are quite at risk, I would say. And I have a great set of family members in all these companies, whether it's Kaho or AHPI, the healthcare associations, whether it's the Chennai Angels, whether it's some of the boards I share time with, Proclean, Tosh, the Great Lakes Institute. These are great families of ours that we have learned to love to share time with. And I can't go and spend time with many of them, whether it's locally or whether it's a bit more distant. And you know something? When you get a chance, hug them, thank them, and appreciate them. Because I will tell you, there are lots of families at these times that don't have the privilege of doing that, right? They lose their loved ones at a time like this. And the toughest thing about COVID, I will tell you, is it is very hard to say goodbye properly. Because if you're kept in quarantine, how do you say goodbye? If the person dies very quickly and you have very little information because you're not physically there in the hospital, which is what a lot of today is about, how do you actually get to say thank you for my life? Thank you for helping me at these different moments in my life when I needed help. And I think those are things that we should be very cognizant of. And I think if you can go and thank the people around you and feel grateful for more, we will smile much more, right? And I learned that from my visits to Africa, especially Kenya and South Africa. Uh, the people, especially in rural parts of India and Africa, they smile so much with so little, right? So they learn to be more happy with a lot less. And you can see this in different parts of the world. And I think if you can learn that, it is a phenomenal value that you can embrace for your own life.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So the other area which I want to touch is what are the issues or problems faced by healthcare industry, and what do you think would be the solutions for that in general about healthcare industry
I
now
think that's
because
a
of COVID?
great question, right? I think, look, the biggest problems I think today is the availability of transparent information is actually very hard, right? Lots of complaints have come, and I think blame unfairly a lot of the time to doctors, to hospitals, to many healthcare institutions about, say, the size of the bill. There are always a few bad eggs in every basket, right? 3% of every class needs discipline. 90% of the class are great students. And maybe 7% are special children, either super smart or children that need a different way of learning. And I think the same applies in healthcare. So if you use that analogy, there are lots of great hospitals, lots of great doctors, nurses working. And I think many of them sacrifice a lot. The average doctor studies around 35 to 40 years of their life to become a postgraduate doctor who can practice.
Yes.
They barely spend time at home. I think a lot of people are giving them a tough time how much doctors charge, how much hospitals charge. You know, if you feel unfair, put the bill online and have that as an open, transparent discussion. You will see that the bill in most hospitals is actually quite fair. The bill in some hospitals who are unfair, by being transparent, will become public information and people will stop going to those hospitals, right? Or they will understand that there was
True.
a complex issue and therefore there was a different way of managing it and therefore the bill was fair. So I think one of the things is over regulating things like bills from the government side actually wins no favors for anybody because you are breaking supply demand balancing. And therefore, at a time where hospitals, many of them are going out of business, or many doctors who are struggling to make livelihoods at home, or nurses who really don't earn that much in terms of salary, this is not a time to be telling you how much a doctor or a nurse or a hospital should earn. This is a time to say, how can we help you make sure we treat customers at scale? I think that's one. I think the second big one for healthcare is all about we need more people in healthcare. See, healthcare has never been blessed with the number of doctors, the number of nurses, the number of allied health people, the number of professionals in health actually is not that many. When I moved back, a lot of my friends said, you are never going to earn that much money in healthcare. And I'll tell you a secret. The salary cut between leaving McKinsey and joining my hospital, I took a salary cut of 60 times, right?
Wow.
And you can say that was your business, but you know, I was brought up in a meritocracy culture. What you earned did matter. But my dad told me something, and my grandma told me something that they said, you know, the money you earn is good, but it does not tell you what you're worth in life. So, if you do the right thing, you will understand what is your worth in life. And so, my parents made me do one thing. They asked me to work the first Christmas and New Year, 2007, in the hospital on a shift, right? So I went on a shift, and just like anybody in the operations team, I went and visited patients, I went and visited doctors, I went and visited the family members of our customers. And I learned some very tough lessons. I learned that there were doctors and nurses sacrificing days when they would rather be in their family in the hospital because somebody has to work. One. Number two, this was the most complex business because on Christmas Day, I am worrying, is my housekeeping person going to turn up to work? Right? And if they don't turn up to work, the patient and the doctor and the family person still expects clean room, clean environment, hygiene. If they have an operation, they need infection control, cleanliness. So therefore, that was a very different beast. So hospital infection control, it's like a hotel, more complicated by doctor surgery and much more complicated than managing drilling rigs, building chemical plants, buying companies or consulting in the world's largest companies. This is tough. So having talent around you matters. And I think this is a sector, if you ask me, one of the solutions is we need more volunteers and more professionals from other industries joining people like us. Dr. Mehta's, community hospitals, good hospitals in health, join us and help raise the bar. Because as you've seen during COVID, I so wish that we could save every life, but we can't because there aren't enough hospitals. There aren't easy ways for people to get to hospitals. There aren't enough beds. There aren't enough doctors. There aren't enough nurses. There is not transparent information of how it is available to you. There is not enough information available that if you have these symptoms, you can get this treatment. So I think we need more volunteers in health to help us in healthcare, survivors as I call it, right? People who want positive karma, come and join our industry, save more lives. I really love the idea that I've seen a couple of people say, I'd like to volunteer my time. And these are 60-year-old, 70-year-old, 80-year-old people. 15-year-old children, 20-year-old children are jumping out and saying, I would like to volunteer some time in a hospital. Tell me how. And sometimes it's as simple as I've got a cancer patient, their loved ones don't live in the same city. Can we put them next door to them so that they can give them some moral support? So these are my three things. The new normal is about technology, it is about human value and wealth, as I call it, and it is about being grateful and embracing.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we move on to the third segment, which is surprise segment. There are four questions there. You can spread your creative wings and you can answer however you want. The first question is you're getting a phone call from Director Maniratnam's office, and they say they've been seeing your interviews and they've observed you for quite some time, and they are impressed with the variety and multifaceted approach you have towards life, and they would like you to write a script for them at this time, especially just after COVID, with a message from your experience, concentrating on three or four core areas, and with your interventions, like special areas where it needs intervention. It can be any area, like it can be any sector. That's up to you. Which areas would you choose in your script?
Wow. So I think the best script is always the real script, right? Meaning that you need to escape for fantasy, but sometimes the strangest stories are there in real life.
Very true.
So if you ask me, I would suggest that you go talk to the doctors, nurses, the allied health guys that work every day. You learn much more than getting somebody like Sam or Samir to be a script writer, right? But that being said, I think what would I change? I think this is if I could change any three things, I would tell people and all my friends, Stop voting because somebody pays you to.
Okay.
Vote because you believe in the leader, right?
Mhm.
I think that is the most important thing. And if somebody pays you, they're not the right leader. One. Number two, pay your taxes because your taxes matter in saving somebody's life somewhere. And then make sure, because you have voted for the right leader, to hold them accountable so that their tax money gets spent right. Do you know a hospital bed in a government hospital, whether it's central or state, in any state in India, is more expensive than the most expensive private bed? You don't see this because it's hidden under your tax money. So, to me, that is something you can fundamentally change. If you hold your leadership and you vote the right person or talent in and you hold them accountable, you then pay your taxes, you will then get the right services that support you. The third is change anything. You know something? I pass the third one back to you, Hari. I think if people do these two things, we will be better off. If there was the third thing, I would suggest is perhaps share more with people less fortunate. Whether it's money, whether it's your wisdom or your knowledge, whether it's your things at home that you don't use anymore. If you can take five things from your house that you don't use, five things from your office, an old computer, an old fan, that you don't use, your handheld tablet, and give it to somebody who you think will appreciate that. Maybe
Mhm.
there's somebody, your driver has a child who's trying to study, or your classmate has a really old computer and you are just upgrading and you would like to sell. But simple acts of kindness, if you ripple enough, the world changes. So that would be the third thing I change. That if there were five things in your house today that you don't use, that you have not used for the last 3 years, please take it and give it to somebody you think will appreciate it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. The next question is, you're given a time machine. You can go back to your past, not future, past, and choose any one leader who you'd like to shadow for a month. Come back to 2020 and publish a book on your learnings. Who would that leader be, and what would you learn?
The leader I really respect the most in life, other than my father, my
Hmm.
mother, my grandmother, my aunt, and some of my mentors who I share time with, people like Ramraj, who's on the board of Chennai Angels, people like Gopal Srinivas. They're leaders I really deeply respect because they've taught me things that I wouldn't have learned easily. Uh, I actually also like leaders who are quite young and use different experiences.
Hmm.
But you know, the leader that I respect the most is still alive, and I would love to meet Bill Gates, because Bill Gates, I'll tell you why. He created a company that transformed the PC internet digital ecosystem that remarkably. And it wasn't just one industry he changed the way we play games through the Xbox or the PC. He changed the way we communicate through uh, Internet Explorer and email. Uh, he played a big role, but actually the reason I respect him the most is also because he is the one leader in the world who has actually changed another industry relatively selflessly, and a whole industry. He has single-handedly, with his wife,
Mhm.
invested to try and cure diseases in parts of the world they don't live, in parts of the world they rarely visit or had visited, in places and in sciences they didn't fully understand. And they hired real talent to make that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to go after diseases, especially a lot of non communicable diseases, right? And viruses. And Bill Gates actually in 2015 had suggested that we should start preparing for things like pandemics. And honestly, nobody took them seriously. So I would love, if there is one thing you can help me with, Hari, or anybody on this call, if I could spend 1 hour with Bill Gates, I will say thank you for my life. But the one leader who no longer lives is my grandfather. I think my grandfather, I was born in the same month he passed away. And from what I've heard, he was quite dynamic. And I would love to understand the choices he had to make in different times of life, because he was somebody that moved to Chennai in 1923 during the British rule to set up a hospital that the Gujarati and the North Indian community had said we need. And that was the first thing for Dr. Mehta's. He was a person who married my grandmother when she was very young. And so he got married. He had his first wife, unfortunately, passed away. And his second wife is my grandmother. And my grandmother, who passed away, Dr. Savita Ben Mehta, got married to him at the age of 13. So actually, they went through a type of life I can't even imagine, right? Uh, I would like my daughters to marry when they're 30, not 13, right? Definitely not very young, but times were different then. And my grandfather insisted my grandmother have a professional education. He made sure she became a doctor. He made sure that she stood her own 2 feet, and then only created the company. And that's where Dr. Mehta's came about. That for a person who got married at a young age in Gujarat, who then moved with my grandmother to Madras to go and try something at a time where, if you weren't friends of the British, I can't imagine that life, right? I can't imagine what tough decisions they had to live through. The fact that they decided to treat anybody who came to the hospital and treat them with affection, to treat them with love, and to treat them with as much, and to embrace the family value, that is something that I would love to understand why. Because I think if you understand why, how is easier. Those are my leaders. So Bill
Okay.
Gates, grandpa.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. The next one is you're given a magical wand to change one thing in the world. What would you change? Globally, it will change immediately.
I would vote politicians and leaders of countries because they are talented and because they're competent, not because they can buy your vote or shout loud.
Okay. Very good one. Okay. Now the next one is you finish your work, you go back to your home, have dinner with the family, you sleep. Next day morning when you get up, your CM Samir Mehta. So, what are the three sectors would you intervene, and what would be your intervention? Three sectors, and what would be the intervention?
Three sectors:
Top three sectors which
healthcare,
is close.
healthcare
Healthcare.
because I understand it deeply.
Okay.
Uh, And what I would change in healthcare is I would like transparent costing for all healthcare systems to be public. How much is Madras Medical College spending per case? How much is Rajiv Gandhi Hospital spending per case? How much is CMC Vellore spending per case? How much is Apollo spending per case? How much is AIMS spending per case? We will learn very quickly how to be more efficient if we do that. One.
Okay.
Number two, I think taxes, and that's because I don't understand that very much. So
Okay.
I will also tell you that I would try and make taxes in a manner that more people pay, but pay less.
Okay.
If you tax a few people heavily, they will fall over, or they will feel a little bit of angst in their heart.
Hmm.
But if you tax everybody a little bit, everybody will feel fair. So I think this concept of tax equality and fairness to balance it out.
Hmm. Hmm.
India pays, I don't know if you know, India has the lowest number of taxpayers in the world per capita,
Wow.
which means a lot of people don't pay their taxes. They get paid social goodies. They pick a government in office so that the tax dollars collected does not appeal to them or apply to them. That's not right. I think
Right.
if you charge a farmer a little bit, if you charge a retail person a little bit, and if you charge a businessman a little bit more, and if you charge a multimillionaire a lot more in fair proportion, everyone feels good. So you should fair tax equitably. And to be honest, GST is a step in the right direction. We can
Mm-hmm.
argue how it is implemented, but it is a step in the right direction. So
Mm-hmm.
hats off to center and
Okay.
hats off to states that support it, including Tamil Nadu.
Okay.
Uh, I think the third thing I would change is, uh, you know, the future is what you believe, it is not what we think holds us back. So the more I hear from people, like on the news, what Donald Trump thinks or what people say, I have actually realized in the last 10 years of my life and my time in Russia as an election observer that what you see in the press is not always true. What you see in the press is a story that is made to appeal to a certain audience, sometimes who pays for that media or sometimes for likes or a
Okay.
little bit of gratification. I would love more people, honestly, like you, Hari, who
Mm-hmm.
tell stories that are a little bit the naked truth and to share it across platforms where there is perhaps less reason. Sam doesn't have a reason to stand here because, just like I talk about Dr. Mehta's, I have a lot of respect for institutes like CMC Vellore, Arvind Eye Hospital, Shankar Netralia, Sundaram Medical Foundation, and many of them live in the same state as me. Some of them compete and some of them cooperate really well, right? These are great institutions. These are institutions that really I'll pay respects because I've learned a lot from them. I've learned deeply from many of these institutions. I've and I think if you embrace that a little bit, that you can learn from everybody and there are good people out there, our world is better. Because if we always think there is a boundary or I only compete because my family is just Dr. Mehta's family or just my unit of small people at home, the world is smaller, it's a bit less bright, bit less green, a little bit less colorful. And I'd rather smile. And I think probably IIT and many of my fellow students have taught me that sometimes by sharing more, you receive more. And the best example is COVID, right? During COVID, the world shares its research relatively freely. There are more papers, I have been told, that are published on COVID than there are papers that have been published on diabetes, which means that at some point we will understand how to crack COVID because the world is cooperating across borders, it's cooperating with different skill sets, it's cooperating with access to different data. And I think if we can do that, have, for example, a health transparent data exchange, wouldn't it be helpful to save many more lives? If we can be truthful about how much education costs, the
Mm-hmm.
transparency of how much the bill costs if I want to study in Manipal, or the bill costs how much I want to study in any university anywhere in the country, or the bill costs in a government institution. It's all public. Person will choose which place they want to go and pay that money based on a combination of how much they want it and how much they can afford it. And if you want it badly, we will find a way.
Very good. It's more of collaboration than competition. Very well said there.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now, the next one is the gratitude segment where you can name the key people who have supported you during your milestones and thank them. Of course, there'll be thousands of people, but key people in main instances of your life, you can pay your gratitude. Over to
Look, I think my families across my
you.
nuclear families, my wife, my kids, my mothers, my
Mhm.
fathers, right, are priceless. My friends are priceless because we treat them as family. And if you treat others like how we'd like to be treated ourselves, the
Mhm.
world becomes nicer. I think I really have to thank my many mentors. I've got my mentor in a couple in the Netherlands, Roland, Marius. I've got some in Latin America, Marco, Sean. I've got some in North America. I've got Thomas. I mean, many people, and then many in India, people like Ramaraj, people like Padma. people like Gopal, people like Bala Balachandran, who created Great Lakes, is a great
Mhm.
mentor. Gopal of TVS, Ramraj of the Chennai Angels. So I think these are huge people. I have some great friends around me. I have a phenomenal board at Dr. Mehta's. People who are professional, and I really have to thank each and every one of them. Rajiv, Mithun, and Alex. I think Alex, especially, I've forgotten to mention you and Vijay and Dr. Gyani have really made me a little bit brighter because you helped me understand healthcare in a very different way to how I think I learned it just being at Dr. Mehta's. In Dr. Mehta's, I was very focused. I was focused only what was in the cup of water. But I
Mhm.
think by people like that, they've taught me, Dr. Venkatesh Tupil, they taught me about the world out there. And I think especially people like Dr. Giridhar Gyani, Alexander Thomas, and Vijay Agarwal, I think these are people who have taught me volumes. But these are people who you think are senior. There are also lots of people that I learn from that are young. I will tell you the strangest mentor I have today, other than my kids, is my cat. I
Mm.
am not a cat person, I'm more a dog person. But you know something? When you take in, we took in a cat that was stray, that was a little kitten that was mewing for food, and we thought, we could look after the cat, so we took the cat in. My kids did blackmail me to take the cat, so it wasn't an easy decision for me, easier for them. But our cat Shauna, I think, is probably the strangest example I think anyone's ever given. Teaches you things as well, right? Very self sufficient, comes, gets love, goes and walks around your leg, marks its territory a little bit, is very curious, so it goes and looks at anything, new places. It's a little bit fearless, right? A dog is barking, it'll go up to the dog and smell the dog. And I think you learn things from every piece of stimuli out there in the world. And I guess since I'm doing my doctorate in a combination of human behavior, which is psychology, and artificial intelligence, the stimuli matters, but how you respond to it, or the algorithm of response, matters much more.
Yeah,
And so
responsibility.
sometimes I think you see that with the cat. If you scratch the cat where it likes to be scratched, Shauna will purr, and you can hear that. And if you listen, you will hear it. So sometimes you have to really listen to what truly matters in life.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I requested for 60 minutes of your time. We just crossed it. Lot of information. You have encapsulated in such an interesting manner to easily digest and also to think over it and then probably practice it in whichever template or whichever industry we are in. Thank you so much, sir. உங்க நல்லெண்ணங்கள் நிறைவேற என்னுடைய வாழ்த்துக்கள். Any closing remarks from you, sir?
I think my wish to one and all, please stay safe and healthy. If you need any help, come to us. I will try and help, or my family in Dr. Mehta's, or my families beyond Dr. Mehta's, through organizations like the Healthcare Association of India, the Consortium of Accredited Hospitals, and there are many other organizations like this, the Chennai Angels. We will try our best to help you. I think today this is the day humanity needs each other to be better and to survive and to be richer for it. We should also pay attention to the environment we live in. Guys, tomorrow's environment is what our grandchildren will live in. Please look after it. If you can do things by using less water, using less electricity, please do. And if there are leaders that promise how they're going to give you VCRs or satellite dishes more than they are telling you how they're going to give you clean water and better health, my suggestion is pick the second. They are priceless and they are what matters. So, more than anything, please stay safe and healthy. And we wish you great health. Any help, reach out. We at Dr. Mehta's or our families will look after you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Hari, and thanks for the opportunity to share some wisdom so that at least my cat or my daughters are not bored with me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
That was Dr. Samir Mehta. I've seen him in a couple of conferences on stage and met him a couple of times in his office. A very interesting person and a lot of things every single time whenever I've touched on any different topic, even if it's a short period of time. something to think on, something to ponder on. Like, he always gives certain new areas. Interesting personality. I'm really grateful that he had allotted 60 minutes of his time to share his life and his learnings and his predictions and how we have to collaborate, not compete. A lot of areas, a lot of wisdom shared in a 60-minute period. Of course, as he said, like, any area where support is required, please do get in touch with him. Thank you.